and I'll film you chopping my onions.
Yeah, onions. Alright, if you made it this far, congratulations on surviving another day of the internet. Still working a little bit today on the fuse panel. So I did get bolts and everything, so I have like legitimate bolts with locking nuts on the back side on every connection. So nothing is going to move. I did do one here, one there, and then the plastic will hold it back together. I did run the positive to the fuse block, the negative to the fuse block, put the fuses in. I've been going through and heat shrinking all the terminals, and I added ring terminals on there just in case there's any vibration. I didn't want to do a spade or just stick the wire in there. In case there's any vibration in the car, which there will be, if this starts to back out a little bit, there's no risk of it falling out until the screw actually completely falls out. So I did get some of the stuff wired. ECU plugs, the solid state relay is wired. I did remove, a couple of you guys caught it in the last video, I did remove the wire going to the other relay, and I removed that guy there. So this one I'm not going to use. For some reason I decided I wanted to put it to there. I don't know why I did that, to be honest. Somebody asked like, hey, why did you do that? And I really just don't have a good answer. I just didn't do it right. So again, starting to do the inputs and outputs for all the relays. I still have to do trans brake input from computer. I still have to do the bump in from the button. I'm changing the button to be a negative input to the ECU. I did change this wire. Is going to be coming around. It basically comes down to the back side of here for the trans brake input. So now I have the positive coming from solid state over here through to the red wire that goes to trans brake. And I got to do like ignition, blinkers, trans cooler fans, whatever. So I only have a few more wires left, and I'll try to clean it up a little bit on the back side. One other thing I did was I went through and I added a 8-gauge wire from the back. So this one's actually a positive, even though it's black. So I just put some red heat shrink on the ends. So I mean, I'll know it's positive, so that's not a big deal. I still kept my same positives, like the 0 gauge going front and back. But then I had this wire right here essentially going from front to back. I just had a rig terminal going from my switch on the back, and then I had 2 separate wires with fuses. So instead of doing 2 separate wires, I decided to replace this with one 8-gauge wire. So it's just a single wire going from front to back, and then this guy will go up to the front, and that's the one coming here to the positive on the fuse block. So that should be perfectly fine. So that's really what I'm going to keep working on. It's kind of a lot of just like boring stuff and a lot of wiring and repetition with crimping and heat shrinking and stuff. So I'll come back when it's done, and then we'll talk about it and start testing stuff, because that's what I want to do, is like make sure the trans brake still works, make sure the bump still works, check the fans that they're coming on at the right time, make sure all that stuff is still good. So let's do that. Okay, so in the car now, I did get everything loomed here and zip tied to the rail. That's what the whole board looks like. ECU, solid state relay, everything's all wired up. Everything works. So I do have, let me turn this on. That's my ignition and then starter switch. My line lock works. You can hear it click. My blinkers work. Right blinker. Left blinker. And everything's good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hook up the trans brake and bump. So I have the brake button here, and then the bump button here on the opposite side. So I'm going to show how to hook that up in the computer. Now I'm going to do one of those cool transitions over to the screen capture. Alright, so we're going to set up the rev limiter, the trans brake input and output, and the bump. So that's what we're going to do now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the spark ICF guy right here, a little spark plug. We'll click on that, and then we'll go to rev limiters, and then we'll enable our rev limiter 1. So once this is enabled, it will create the input. I already have it set up at 3600. That's where I'm going to leave it. So when I go into pin map, you're going to see that there's rev limiter 1 on the inputs unassigned. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. So we don't have to close that, but we can. We'll go to System ICF, Basic I/O, Staging, and then enabling this is going to create a input 1 and input 2. So input 1 is going to be your trans brake in, input 2 is going to be the bump in, and you have to assign those. So also when you assign this, it will create a staging output. So when you have your input signal from the brake and from the bump, it's going to assign a corresponding output. So when you essentially when you hit the button for your trans brake, it will create the output to the solenoid, which is the staging output. And then when you use your bump, which is the input 2, you hit the bump button, it's going to interrupt this output on the solenoid. So what we can do right away is take the staging output, I'm going to put it down onto my output 4, which is the output 4 wire that I have set up, and I'm going to take rev limiter 1, put it on input 1, staging 1, put it on input 1, because that's how I have it wired. I have input 2 as coolant pressure, so my input 3 is going to be staging input 2. So that's how I have this all set up, and then that is pretty much set. So staging, you can change it from single pulse to duty cycle. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it on single pulse, and then I will adjust this. So that's pretty much it. Let's save it, and we'll see where it ends up. Okay, so what I have here is my trans brake button, and then I have the bump button on this side. So you can hear it clicking when I hit the button, and then I hit the bump. But you can also verify it with the solid state relay. When I hit the trans brake button, lights up, bump. You can see it interrupting. So basically when I hit the trans brake, it's going to activate trans brake. When I hit the bump button, it interrupts it for whatever that duration is that you put in there. So you could set it up for a certain duration or duty cycle or whatever. But basically, it's going to be two inputs to the computer, one from the brake, one from the bump button, and that creates one single output. So when you push the button, you're actually giving a ground to the computer, which activates the solid state relay, and then you interrupt it with the bump. All right, so we're gonna do we're going to test the trans brake and the bump function, but I got to get in the car, I got to set up the GoPro, and my wife is in there, so I have to crawl over her. So I got to set up the GoPro because we're going to do GoPro inside the car. Huh? Yeah, you don't need a seatbelt. I'm gonna crawl over her. It'd be funny if the camera was already set up. That would have been really good. Hello, welcome back. hello, welcome back. That's Hunter Tuned YouTube intro. So she felt like saying that for some reason. She doesn't like me, so we're gonna turn the car on. I'm gonna turn it on. Up. The red one up. And then the yellow one.
the anticipation of a fair ride. You know what it's gonna do? This is like burning my eyes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
That is the sweet. It's tears of joy. Is really what it is. It's not. It's not exhaust fumes. It's tears of joy. That's like race car. It's like race car stuff. Get out. Tears of joy will kill you if you breathe them too long.
This is the next time I'll film you chopping my onions.
Yeah, onions.